Hello there and welcome to Tom's Warhammer Minis. In this guide we're focusing on the death company of Blood Angels. The Blood Angels eventually will succumb to the Black Rage. The death company, they are the Berserkers. Their minds lost to the Black Rage entirely, they fight on the battlefield unto the death. In this guide I'm going to showcase how you can do this awesome scheme in contrast. However, it's going to use my reverse edge highlight method. If you're new to that, nice and simple. Imagine all those edge highlights you have to apply to a Space Marine. You're applying absolutely zero with this guide, and yet it's going to have that heavy metal style of edge highlighting. It's like magic, but made easier. So grab your paints and your brushes and let's get hobbying. And we're beginning with our Blood Angels Death Company Space Marine. Now whenever I start a guide, I like to go for the ground basics just so we're all on the same wavelength. To begin with, let's talk about the model itself. This is, in that sense, a bog standard Space Marine Assault Intercessor. However, I'm using the Blood Angels plastic upgrade sprue, the newer one that came out last year, just to enhance those details. So things like the symbol up here, we've got this exclusive sword arm here, shoulder pad, and the kind of satchel bit here, that kind of stuff, as well as the head. So obviously customize it as much as you want. The main point here is the color scheme. With that said, the model is also fully assembled and I primed it in White Scar. As always, I like that bright, bold, vivid finish. Now you might think, why would you do that when it's going to be black? Nice and simple. We are doing what's known as the reverse edge highlight. So when I do this, it'll be parade level ready. You don't have to apply a single edge highlight. We'll build from light to dark, avoid the outer edges when we get to the black paint, because we have that previous underlayer, which becomes the automatic edge highlight. If you've seen my other guides, you know exactly what we're doing here. But with that said, let's get started. First up, we're going to work on the soft seal armor. We always want to get this done first when it comes to contrast painting because it gets in the way, and if we spoil armor, although in this case it's not going to matter because it's going to be all black, it just makes it easier to correct now rather than later on. The colour here is Black Templar, and this is a classic contrast base coating. So small airbrush, nice and simple, apply the paint like you normally would into that entire surface area. You've got the sections up here where the armpits would be, elbows, wrists, between the groin, hips, back of the legs. Quite classic on a Space Marine. Sometimes it's covered, and in a section like that we don't need to worry, but obviously when you've got big open bits like this, we obviously want to cover. So get that done, and that completes that entire section, because the beauty of Black Templar, it pulls away enough to give us that perfect, in White Scar, automatic edge highlight. So let's move on to the next step. So first of all, we are going to cover the entirety of the armor. I'm going to talk about the things you need to look out for and the things you can get away with in a second. Let's talk the color first. To begin with, we're doing the reverse edge highlight. We need an underlayer. This is going to work towards what will be the automatic edge highlight color before we get to the black. So the color here is Space Wolf Grey. I have added Lahmium Medium, but this isn't part of the ratio. It's just a tiny drop to help with the flow. Now when it comes to contrast painting, obviously we want to be as neat as possible, and yes, you can absolutely get it neat on the armor. It's always good practice. That is always a standard when it comes to my kind of painting. However, with this scheme, what I'm going to explain here is because it's all in black, we can get away with being sloppy and messy. Obviously not hitting surfaces like this, which we don't want to get paint on yet. However, when it comes to the armor, like you can see here, that is not neat. Got it here, absolutely heavy pooling. It's not what I would normally want. However, you got to imagine the only area that we don't want affected is the actual edges themselves. So when we got pooling like this, it's going to get covered in the darkest black imaginable, so it makes zero difference whatsoever. So it gives us a bit of leeway to be a bit quicker, a bit messier, but obviously when it comes to pooling, we don't want it going over the edge. That's when it does become a problem. So get that in place, let it dry. We need to shade it next to get it to the edge highlight color, and we'll cover that next. Next up, we're taking Drakenhof Nightshade and we're applying this over every single part of that Space Wolves Grey, including the outer edge too. So this is just to tone it down and when I'm saying toning down, we're talking about the actual edge highlight itself, but also to settle more darkly into the recesses, especially on Space Marine armor, where we want that outer edge highlight, such as, for example, the shield here. Having that darkness in the recess just means we've got that line on the outer edge that we can avoid. So get that done. Once again, check for pooling. Bits like this doesn't matter as long as it's not going over that outer edge. So let's move on to the next step and finish off that armor. Next up, we're going to finish off all of that black armor, and the color we're using here is Black Legion. Nice and simple. We want this, not Black Templar. This is the solid, pure black contrast paint. And the beauty here, we can take our time. Normally your contrast paints, when you apply it onto a surface area, say we did a bit of the shield and then we had to stop for a second, you're going to get a drying line. Obviously with Black Legion, it being so dark, you're not going to get that. So you really can take your time and just really be patient here, catching every single edge highlight. Of course, when it comes to your miniature, picking which highlights you want to pick out, that is down to you. You could absolutely use this method like I have to pick out every single individual one, which would be quite a challenge in normal traditional painting methods, especially when it's fully assembled. So the other thing to note when it comes to this style of colouring for this actual model is obviously we're painting it up to the edge, not over the edge, but it's going to take time. The whole model is in this colour scheme practically, so it takes a lot longer than the usual Space Marines that I tend to do in this method, just because we're not breaking up the colour, it's the whole thing. So be patient, but the way I think of it is once you've done an armour panel, because that's how you're doing it, taking it panel by panel, you don't have to start anywhere particular, it's where you want to start, but once you've done that panel, it is then finished. Now if you do make a mistake, if you do go over the edge, it's not the end of the world. When I create these colour schemes, there is an actual layer paint that you can use to do traditional edge highlighting. So for instance, say you got Black Legion over the edge, which I haven't here, but just pretend I had. Fenrisian Grey is the colour you're looking for here. If it's a bit darker than this, then Rust Grey, but in this sense, Fenrisian Grey is the automatic edge highlight if you need to fix it. So get that done, we'll move on to the next step. Next up, before we start working on the gun casing, which is also going to be in the reverse edge highlight, I want to pick out the plasma coils for the weapon first. It just makes sense to have it nice and neat, and then we know exactly where to apply the other paint. I've also taken advantage to do the base as well. Of course, that's because I want an Arctic theme. However, when it comes to basing, you do what works for you. The colour here is Frostheart. Nice and simple, classic contrast painting, using a small airbrush and being very, very patient, not catching the other edges of the casing. However, if you get on the casing, it's not the end of the world. You can always fix it with White Scar. So get that done, let it dry, we'll move on to the next step. Next up, we're going to start working on the gun casing, once again in the reverse edge highlight style. So for our Death Company, all the gun casings are in that classic Blood Angels red colour scheme. So to begin with, I've taken Gryph Hound Orange. We're working towards what will be the edge highlight colour. So I haven't used Lahmium Medium here, just apply it like you normally would. If you feel you do need a bit of Lahmium Medium just to help with the flow, then just add the tiniest amount. But get that done, get it in place, let it dry, we'll move on to the next step. Next up, we're taking Berserker Bloodshade, and I'm creating this in a 1-to-1 mix. So 1 part Berserker Bloodshade, and into a palette 1 part of Lahmium Medium. Stir it together well, and nice and simple, apply that directly over the entire orange. The whole point here is it's not going to tint it like that, but it's going to settle quite heavily into the recesses, creating that natural dark shadow that we need. And it just means we're ready for the reverse edge highlight. Once again, let it completely dry, we'll move on to the next step. Next up, for our gun casing, we're going to finish it off with a very subtle red mix. Into a palette, take 3 parts of Baal Red. This gives us the smoothness and control. Mix that with 1 part of Flesh Tearers Red. This is going to give it a little bit of darkness so it's not too flat looking. And I add 2 parts of Lahmium Medium to that mix to help with the flow of paint, keeping it nice and smooth. So 3 parts Baal Red, 1 part Flesh Tearers Red, 2 parts Lahmium Medium. And once again, we're doing a reverse edge highlight. So on the flat surface areas, up to the edge, don't go over the edge. and it just finishes off the gun casing nice and neatly. If you need a correcting paint, if you do go over the edge, then the automatic colour here is Lugganath Orange. So get that done. The red casing is complete. We're going to move on to the leather belt. Next up, we're base coating the belt and our leather satchels. So once again, we're doing the reverse edge highlight method. This is the underlayer. The colour here is Gore Grunta Fur, and it's just a nice and simple base coat. So, small airbrush. Be careful with the other bits that we've done. Get it in place, let it dry. We'll move on to the next step. Next up, we're going to finish off all of that brown leather detail. So the Gore Grunta Fur that we painted on is the automatic edge highlight colour. What we're taking here is Garaghak Sewer, doing the reverse edge highlight. So nice and simple, the central parts up to the edge, not over the edge. And that finishes off the details very nicely. If you need to correct an edge highlight, if you catch it over the edge, then the colour you'd want here is Death Claw Brown. That would be the nearest one. So get that done. We'll move on to the next step. Next up, we're going to work on the gripped handle of our sword blade. So nice and simple. Once again, we're doing reverse edge highlight. The colour this time is Volupus Pink. This is going to be the automatic edge highlight colour. However, when we apply it, make sure you get it really strongly into those recesses. We can go over the bottom bit here because that's going to be a metallic detail. But yeah, we just need it in that recess to be nice and strong. Obviously, let it dry before moving on to the next step. Next up, we're going to finish off that sword grip nice and simply. We don't need much here for this actual sword. There's hardly anything to do, and it's super easy because they are chunky panels. The colour is Sigvuld Burgundy, exactly the same as before. Central part up to the edge, do not go over that edge, and it's all done for you with that automatic edge highlight. If you need to fix it, this kind of instance, check how dark it is because of the Volupus Pink, but you're looking between something of Emperor's Children or Pink Horror. So get that done, and that's time to move on to the next step. Next up, we're going to base coat and highlight our white details. So this is the icons that we see here. We've got this little wrap going around here, this bit of rope, and again an icon on the shoulder pad, as well as our little scroll here. So nice and simple, our white details, we're just base coating them entirely in Apothercary White. Obviously let that dry. The highlight here, which we're going to do, and there's no point reverse edge highlighting it just because it becomes quite messy and tricky. We're just going to take white scar and just relayer those edges nice and simply. This one I've just picked out very carefully each individual strand just to make it that bit brighter. For our scroll detail, nice and simple, we're base coating in Skeleton Horde. Quite simply, let it dry. Then we're going to take a second load of this. However, this is when we're going to do the reverse edge highlight. So we're applying the second layer into that central part up to the edge, not including the edge. That first layer of Skeleton Horde is the automatic edge highlight, as you can see. So get that done. We'll move on to the next step. Next up, it's time to move on to our metallic details, and I'm starting with the silver. And nice and simple, we're just going to go straight for the base coat, the shade and the highlight, because there's not too much to do here. We want it bright because we've got so much dark armor going on. Otherwise, if we go down the dark silver route, it just won't stand out. The color we're using here for the base coat is Iron Hand Steel. So the sword, bits of the gun, the buttons, that kind of stuff. We've got the bits in the backpack here, that kind of stuff, as well as the faceplate. So let that dry, obviously. Once that's done, we need to shade it, and I'm going back to Drakenhof Nightshade. I really prefer this over Null Oil, as it's a lot darker in the recesses and help things to pop. So apply that like you normally would, let it dry. When it comes to our highlights, we need to bring it back to really bright levels, and we're taking Stormhost Silver. So classic edge highlights all over. Get that done, our silver details are complete. Next up, we're going to do all of our gold detailing, and this is going to be, again, the base coat, the shade, and the highlight. However, when it comes to shading, we're not shading everything, and I'll cover that in a second. So to begin with, we're sticking classic here, a base coat of Retributor armor, as you can see. Now when it comes to shading, we're still going to stick classic, and this is going to be Reikland Flesh Shade, obviously letting that gold dry first. Now where we don't need to apply it over every detail, where we've got these icons, the little sort of blood drop here, up here though we have done the under part, which is holding it up, but not the actual blood drop itself. We've got the vial here, and again, blood drop, although you can on this one, it's not particularly needed, but this one here we're not doing. Nice and simple. The actual blood drop itself is going to be red. We don't need to shade it. It's going to get its own colouring, and we've only got the outer edge anyway, so we just leave it as it is. So let all that Viking flesh shade dry, and when it comes to the highlight, once again sticking classic with Liberator Gold. So with that, all of our gold details are complete. Next up, we're going to finish off those remaining details with two different paints, a red and a blue. However, what we're using here, and what I like to use here, is some air paints. So we're not using an airbrush. I don't own one, you don't need one. We're applying this in a normal way with a paintbrush. So to begin with, we're taking Angron Red Clear. So this is going to be for all of those blood drops. As you can see, we've got the vial as well, and the eyes, and the buttons. So take a small amount on the tip of your brush, always starting at the top, bring it down and around like you would do with a contrast paint. Just make sure you've got a nice solid there, but don't overwhelm it so it's pooling excessively. What this will do is dry as a glossy finish, especially over those metallic details. So finishes it off nicely, gives it a real nice natural shine. The gold underneath gives it a nice warm glow effect. However, something to be aware of when using these paints, this takes 4 times longer than a normal paint to dry. It'll be quite sticky and quite tacky for some time, so just be aware of that, because we don't want to knock those details and spoil the work we've done. On the exact same note, I'm taking Calf Blue Clear. So this is over the energy node, as you can see on our sword, but I've also done it over the plasma coils as well. It will go darker into the recesses, and again it will just give it that very subtle glossy finish without overwhelming it. With that, for all intents and purposes, the model is done. However, we're not leaving it there. We're going to do a little bit of freehanding. Alternatively, you can skip that and you can just use transfers instead. So let's move on to the final steps. Next up, we're going to work on the freehanding here, and believe it or not, it's quite simple and there's ways to not worry about it, and that's quite a point here. So there's two colours to begin with. The base colour is Mephiston Red, and then when we're happy and when it's in place, the highlight colour is Wild Rider Red. Now, how to approach this? I've not applied it right up to the edge. As you can see, that Space Wolves Grey is still the automatic edge highlight, and there's a good reason for that. Granted, the box art does. However, by doing it this way, starting in the centre, mapping out the areas we want to be, starting with a thin line, we build up that section. Essentially, if you make a mistake, we can go back to Black Legion and correct it. We can't do that if we've gone over the Space Wolves Grey, but we can certainly do it in the main central area. So that's why I've not gone up to the edge. So lock it in place, make it as thick as chunky as you need, fix it as you need with Black Legion, and when you're happy, do the edge highlight. With that done, our freehanding is complete. What we're going to do next is the transfers. So just for reference, when it comes to transfers, I'm going to be using the Def Company transfer sheet. This came in the army set when I got it a few years, well, whenever it came out, a year back. So nice and simple. It's things like skulls, little blood drips. Of course, there's many similar things on different transfer sheets. You use what works for you, but just in case you really wanted to copy along, want to know where it's coming from, it's this top section up here. So next up, we're applying those transfers. Like I've said, I've gone on the side pauldrons here. We've got the kneecap, skull on the shoulder pad, although some of them don't have that, it's optional. And I've also applied one just on the backpack, just here. Nice and simple. How to apply them? Well, to begin with, I prepped the surface area, and I'm quite old school in this. Taking Art Coat, so this is a gloss varnish, and it just makes the areas smooth. Now on an area like the shoulder pad, we're applying that over the entire inside section, just keeps it all smooth and consistent. Obviously letting that dry, picking your transfer, getting it off via water, and then applying it like you normally would, moving it around until it's in place. Once it's settled and dry, I've taken Storm Shield. This is our matte varnish from Games Workshop, and just apply it once again over the entire surface area, sealing that transfer down forever. So with that, the model is complete. For the base, I've just applied a bit of Valhalla Blizzard, but like I said, you do what works for your army. So what I'm going to do now is apply some tufts and bring it all together at the end. And there we have it. My reverse edge highlight Blood Angels Death Company Marine is complete. And it just looks incredible. An awesome colour scheme, dark and foreboding, but just so simple too. Just so crisp and neat. And not a single edge highlight applied. That's how I like it. Now, if this guide has helped and inspired you, then please do give it that all-important like and share it too. Sharing, yes, it helps my channel, but more importantly, it fulfills the channel's purpose, and that is providing content to teach and support the Warhammer community in their hobby too. And if you haven't subscribed, then please consider doing so. It helps the channel grow. The more it grows, then obviously the more I get to continue supporting you, the awesome Warhammer community. So until that next video, do look after yourselves and happy hobbying.